Hello everyone. I thought I would do a video, and I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't done a video about this yet, about grammar Nazis. Now, I actually don't think any kind of person fills an author with more dread and more anxiety than a grammar Nazi, because I think one of the reasons why authors obsess over polishing their work and editing their work and making sure it's the best that it can possibly be is because at one time or another, we've all been traumatized or criticized by a grammar Nazi. And this can particularly happen when we first start out as writers. For example, the first piece of writing that I posted on the internet, I was attacked by a grammar Nazi, a troll actually, because this person would pose as a grammar Nazi, and then they would come back as a different user, and then they would praise the story, and then they would criticize the story, and they were psychotic, and that was my first experience with online criticism. But I think a lot of writers have been traumatized by grammar Nazis, particularly when they were young, and therefore they think, well, I have to make my story as polished as it can possibly be because I don't want to go through that again. And of course, there are various kinds of grammar Nazis, because there are bad grammar Nazis. Now, what is a bad grammar? There are some people who think they know the rules of grammar, when in reality, that they really don't. For example, I mean, I'm sure all of you have had experiences where someone tries to correct your grammar while also having a terrible grammar themselves. So, for example, someone tried to critique one of my books as having bad grammar in a book review, and I said, "Well, what specifically do you think had bad grammar?" And then they pointed out as an example this sentence that was a metaphorical sentence about heat being exhausted, and said, "Well, heat can't be exhausted." Well, then I said, "So what you really mean is that you don't understand the metaphor. But just because you don't understand the metaphor, you think the metaphor is bad or whatever, that doesn't mean that it's grammatically incorrect." So there are a lot of grammar Nazis who frankly don't know what they're talking about, which proves that for a lot of grammar Nazis, it's not really about the grammar. It's about seeming smarter or intellectually superior to the author. It's like, see, I was able to spot a few things that the author wasn't able to spot. Therefore, I'm better than they are. I'm smarter than they are. I think a lot of it has to do with power, and less to do with actually helping an author out. Because especially since if a grammar Nazi really wanted to help an author out, they wouldn't leave a review or a comment disparaging them or embarrassing the author. They would send a private message and say, well, you've left. Here are a few errors that you made in your book, or I think you made in your book. You might want to look over it. That would be helping if you wanted to help an author. It wouldn't be insulting them or embarrassing an author in private. But I think that many grammar Nazis simply don't understand what the purpose of writing is, and what art is, and what books are. The purpose of writing and of art in general is not to be 100% grammatically perfect. I mean, in fact, I've often found writers who obsess over being grammatically perfect, um, um, that their writing tends to be very stilted and very boring, and there's no life in it. But it is to create dramatic imagery and dramatic storytelling, and in that regard, I think that grammar Nazis can be very shallow, especially because just because you know how to spell a word, for example, that doesn't mean you know what it means or that you know all the little intricacies and subtleties of the word. Anyone can spell. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you're a writer, and so grammar Nazis are shallow on that level, and they don't really understand what the purpose of writing is, and. And in that regard, I find that grammar Nazis also tend to be the kind of people who don't just criticize grammar, but they're the kind of person who will, let's say, if you have a stain on your shirt, they'll say, "You have a stain on your shirt." Or if you try to show them your brand new car, all they'll see is the fact that there's a small smudge on it. They're the kind of people that they can't really enjoy life because they're so caught up on everything being perfect or what their version of perfect is. And in that regard, I think that grammar Nazis are to be pitied among readers because they obviously aren't be able to enjoy themselves because they have unrealistic expectations. And in fact, I have often found that the worst grammar Nazis usually aren't writers at all, or at least they don't make a living writing, or they're not trying to make a living, because if they did, they would be able to empathize with the struggle of a writer trying to make their book perfect. But grammar Nazis often aren't people who write for a living. Therefore, they really can't relate to that. Um, so no, I really do not like grammar Nazis for all the reasons that I've listed, because I think that they've instilled a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of paranoia in writers, and in that regard, they are kind of the bane of the writer's existence. And which is why I think ultimately that if you have somebody who is criticizing your work in a harsh way, that reflects more on them than on you, because it shows that they're, because if someone is trying to act like they are intellectually superior to you, what that really shows is that they are intimidated, in fact, by you. They feel inferior, and that's why they are doing what they're doing. It is a bullying tactic, and a sociopathic tactic in some cases. So that's why I am not a huge fan of grammar Nazis for all of the reasons that I've listed.